shape our lives and contribute to helping us discover our purpose and living meaningful lives. Today's version of Personality segment, we're going to talk to a man who has lived a life of service. 44 years he has contributed to the development of this continent, talking about Ambassador D.K Osei. His book is called Privileged Conversations, Adventures of an African Diplomat. Throughout our conversation with him, if you have any questions, let us know with the hashtag Breakfast Daily and the WhatsApp line 0550-585832. If you're outside Ghana, the country code is +233. Good afternoon, Ambassador.
Good afternoon, Dziffa.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this book, 44 years in the making. Why did it take you so long?
Well, because I was busy. And I wasn't even too sure that I would be capable of writing a book. Mm-hmm. But after I left the presidency, I chose to go back to teach at the university. So I went to teach at Legon. Mm-hmm. And then I used to go and teach at the University of Addis Ababa. And I was teaching at the Ghana Armed Forces College. I was also training mid-career diplomats at the Kofi Annan Training Center. And in all these classes, the students kept asking me why I had not written a book. Mm-hmm. Because what I was seeking to do, because I was teaching mostly theory, was to contextualize that theory in a very practical way. And I also noticed that many of the books which I was using to teach both the theory gave examples from Austria, and the students didn't seem to quite understand until I gave examples which would make sense to them. And it's only within that context that I chose to situate my book in West Africa. If I may just give you two examples.
Please do.
You know, I was teaching negotiation one day in class, and you know, there's a lot of theory about pre-negotiation and all that, but I was talking about the importance of determining the procedure and format of a negotiation before the negotiation, mm-hmm. as part of the pre-negotiation process. The students were asking me, but what has format got to do with it? And I said, look, listen, we went to Nairobi after the elections and all the violence, and President Kibaki was supposed to be talking to Odinga. Went to the presidency, and Odinga had put up his executive seat, mm-hmm. and Kibaki, mm-hmm. and put a seat which was a little lower than the seat that Kibaki was sitting in. Mm-hmm. It took us 5 hours to agree on the format, because there was no way Odinga was going to sit in a seat which gave Odinga, Kibaki, the impression that he was superior to him. And this is for students, I mean, they would never imagine that this would be so important. So when I was talking about the format, I was like, they thought I was crazy, but this was a concrete example. Mm-hmm. And as part of that process, we were discussing still pre-negotiation. And I said to them that you cannot have a proper negotiation around the conference table if you don't predetermine what the contents or the sequence of the agenda would be before the round table conference. Mm-hmm. And they didn't quite understand. And I gave them an example of Fair's intervention in Cote d'Ivoire. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, look, listen, for the rebel movement, it was absolutely important to talk about electoral and constitutional reforms. Mm-hmm. For the government in power, disarmament was more important than constitutional. And I'll explain why. Once you dealt with disarmament and agreed that you were going to disarm them completely, mm-hmm. it was the only tool they had. So one side had already, by determining where the agenda would be fixed, had already won or determined the outcome of the negotiation. So this is the kind of contest which encouraged me that perhaps it will be useful that I, because of all the experience I've had, and I've had quite a bit of experience, you know. So this is what led me to write the book.
But how was the process like, having to relive not only the 44 years you served, but your childhood, your days in school as a sportsman and in university?
It's a very, very interesting period. I'd forgotten most things. But then I was reminded that if I was going to write about the career, then it would be important to situate that in my personality, my upbringing, my childhood kind of parenting, and why I even chose to go into that career. So I started trying to remember things. It was a new exercise for me, and so that's how I started talking about sports and student politics and my parents and my siblings and language as the backdrop to what then led me to the foreign service.
If someone reading the book, the first couple of chapters, actually when you read chapter 1, one would think that you would have ended up as a politician, not necessarily a diplomat.
Why? Because I was president of the Students' Representative Council at a time when there was a lot of political activity.
Yes, and the way you even defined people who lead schools.
Yeah.
As radicals.
I think that a lot of people expected the same thing. And I myself was not too sure I wasn't going to go in that direction. But once I chose to be a career diplomat, that was the end of it. I mean, in our service, you are completely forbidden from partisan politics or even making public pronouncements about politics in your country. Because you serve the government of the day. So from 14th September 1976, when I committed the cardinal sin of wanting, that was it. It ended any political, and maybe it's a pity because I enjoyed being president of the Students' Representative Council. And I recount a bit of it.
You recounted in there, and there was a part where you talked about 1972 when you began participating in different activities and representing your school. So how did your experience, the extracurricular activities you participated in as a president of the Student Council, influence the decision to go the path you took?
Amazingly, as a president of the Students' Union, you represent the students at a lot of international conferences. So I was fortunate enough to have represented my students in Geneva, in Manchester, in Zambia, in Tanzania, and so on and so on. And you meet people. But during the process, you attend conferences and you are representing the views of the students of Ghana. And a lot of that is very political. A lot of that talks about international relations. I'm talking about the time, talking about apartheid, the anti-apartheid struggle and the nuclear tests in the Sahara. And we're taking very militant positions. But because I spoke French, at a lot of these conferences, I became the link between the Francophone student leaders and the Anglophone student leaders. And amazingly, students, we don't have money. So there were no interpreters at the conference. We had to manage without interpreters often. And you then became the unofficial interpreter. But more importantly, you then were negotiating agreements about resolutions. So at a very tender age, I saw myself being involved in what I was to do later, and I was enjoying it. And when you're a young student and you go to Intercontinental Hotel in Lusaka, only white men are allowed to sleep there. You go and wear shorts and shirt, and they want to challenge you, and you take them on. And then they give you awards. So I think all that gave me a foretaste of what I could be doing if I became a diplomat. I never turned back.
One thing I love about the book is at every point there's someone who can relate to that experience. So we find ourselves in a country where our parents force us to just get good grades, not necessarily participate in extracurricular activities like you were doing. How important is this for us to place premium on the things we do outside the classroom so we discover what our life's purpose is?
I really think that the things you do outside the classroom are more important than the things you do in the classroom. Because it's those things which build your character. I cannot tell you what sports has done for me. Traveling as a national athlete and going to Abidjan and meeting Cote d'Ivoire students when I was very young, going to Benin or going to Nigeria, and just sleeping the whole night and imagining the triple jump board to win a medal for Ghana. The resolve And the discipline in training, I'll give you an example. I left the University of Ghana, joined the Foreign Service, then they took me back to the University of Ghana for postgraduate studies.
Yeah.
I went to the athletics field. There was this young man from Achimota who was maybe from 2 when I was in Ambassador. He started calling me old man. So I said, I'll show you.
Who's the old man?
So I put aside my classes and took 2 weeks to train.
You're kidding?
Seriously, I wanted to get back to the field. And it was West Africa University Games. I even had a conference. So they left me and we went to Ile-Ife. But I was so determined not to let it go that I won the only gold medal that any Ghana university won.
Wow.
At those games. Only. But it just tells you how it forges your character. Yeah. Just the still determination. And you know, you wake up at 5:30 a.m. and you are jogging.
Yeah.
Later in life, when you become secretary to the president, and the president calls you at 6 a.m. and you have to work till midnight, it's not a problem. So the things you do, like in Achimota School, just the contact with literature or operas or Molière and the philosophy of 17th, 18th century French literature. I was a young boy, 12, 13, and I was confronting ideas which I would understand much later. Those things make you certainly a better person than the grades you get in school. And I've been most grateful for those opportunities.
But your dad was worried about how you were performing academically. How were you able to balance the two? Because if you had gone astray, you wouldn't have become the diplomat that we are all celebrating today.
My father didn't quite understand it. And I'll tell you why. Because he was used to extraordinary grades. My elder brothers
set the bar high.
Had set standards for me that normal human beings should not be worried about. And I was more interested in sports and theater and opera than and because I was not failing my subject and I was not being average, I was doing relatively well. But he was so concerned that when I left O level to go to sixth form, he drove me to the headmaster and made the headmaster promise him that I would not do any sports, otherwise he was taking me to Pokwari. And I blinked at the headmaster. He said, of course, no sports. As soon as my father left, one term later, I was the athletics captain, I was the football captain, and the cricket captain. So it had become worse. It was so bad that one of my economics teachers, each time she came to class, I would fall asleep.
And you teased that teacher?
And I gave her a hard time.
Do you regret it?
Oh, no, I don't. Oh, when you're at that age, that's where you get your joy from.
But there was a point where you had to take a trip somewhere and your dad wouldn't allow you go.
Yeah, it was very
How did
sad.
you deal with that? Because there are a lot of young people watching us who are rebellious.
I was at the peak of my triple jump prowess. And I was that time #1 in Ghana. And I had never seen Turkey. And there was the International Athletics Federation, which was inviting all nations to go and compete in Turkey. And I saw the route. So they went and told my father, he said, my son is going to do A level. My mother was quite upset.
Wow.
But it upset me. He couldn't understand that I could combine both. And I did it quite easily. You know, the day I finished my exams, first university exam, the last paper, at about 11 a.m., Ghana was competing in athletics competition at El Wak Stadium, and I was the #2 triple jumper. I ran from the exam room, took a bus, got to El Wak, went straight to the changing room, and in 15 minutes, my event was on.
Wow.
I loved it.
How were you able to apply some of these skills that you got from being a sportsman to your career?
You see, and a lot of people don't realize it. In diplomacy, networking, it's a basic fundamental ingredient. And the relationships you build over time come in handy. And I'll give you two very concrete examples. When I was in lower sixth, I went to King's College in Lagos to compete against them, Achimota King's College. And I met a boy called Udoma, whose father was a Chief Justice. recently, there was some difficulty here, and they wanted to speak to the Nigerian government. It happened that Udoma was the Minister of Budget.
Wow.
So when I said, oh, Udoma, I took the phone, that was it. The current Minister of Information in Nigeria happened to be my classmate. So you build those networks early. You know, the current Chief of Staff in Cote d'Ivoire, I knew him when I used to go and do athletics in Abidjan.
Wow.
So, and once you have that kind of network, as you go forward, you just take a phone and it's done. The current Chief of Staff in Guinea, I used to play tennis with. And then he was only a university lecturer. But now he's the senior minister and Chief of Staff. But I picked him up on the tennis court.
Wow.
So these things, sports, relationships, even nightclubs.
Okay, we're going to get there later. But let's talk about your experience in Paris. How's that like?
Oh,
then finding out you have to go to Conakry.
Paris was very good. It was very good because I was fairly junior, and this was a time the whole question of debt management had become an issue in Africa. You know, by that time we're talking about debt rescheduling, not debt forgiveness. But the rescheduling itself was anathema to the donor community. So there was ERP. And Ghana was taken very seriously. But we used to do it in Paris. So at that time, President Rawlings used to send his best team. Kwesi Botwe, Joabe, Kwame Pipra, Ambassador Kenedazzi, and so on and so forth. But I was the youngest officer, so I used to do the draft for them.
Wow.
And of course, Ambassador Kenedazzi, for instance, who became UNCTAD, I think director boss of UNCTAD, he used to write so well. And when you send a draft to him in the hotel room at 11 p.m., he'll call you at 6 a.m. and ask you which school you went to. So it gave me the opportunity to sharpen my economics and to see how the international finance bit operates. And then also we had concurrent accreditation to the Vatican, to Spain, to Portugal, to Greece. And heads of missions don't like going to such places. So they will send you when there's an event and, you know, young boy, you discover Paris was good. It was very, 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 very good. And I made a lot of friends. You know, I should be saying this off air, but I will say it on there. President Wad, when he was in opposition, we had to go and negotiate with him to join President Diouf's government before he broke away to become president. And the only reason why it was easy for me was that we went to negotiate with him in Gabon, but I had met him in his girlfriend's house.
Hey, what were you doing in his girlfriend's house?
She was a friend of mine, nice girl.
Okay.
Cameroonian. I didn't remember her name. Gobia. But because he had met me in the lady's house, it was very easy for him to relate to me when we later had to meet him in Libreville to try and convince him to. And he agreed. He later became senior minister.
Just because he had that rapport with
because
you?
Because he was comfortable.
How did you react to finding out that you have to go to Conakry?
You know, it was in '92, and I'd seen a bit of what was happening in Liberia. And I was looking forward to some adventure. I'd seen Paris, and the life was too easy. So going to Conakry for me was not, I was not frightened. And I also wanted to discover the other side of it. But I'll tell you, it was a very good decision because I really learned my trade in Conakry. You see, in Conakry, first of all, I had two political ambassadors, and both of them were not very interested in what was happening. I had no first secretary, so I was a political officer, economic officer, consular officer, and everything else. So you do all the work, or 95% of the work. And then in between, the heads of missions are moved, so you act as head of mission when you are young. And when you act as head of mission, you receive the president. And since our presidents travel around a lot in the West African sub-region, you find that suddenly you're dealing with your head of state and you are writing speeches for your head of state and you are negotiating on his behalf. You learn so much. And then you have to accompany him to all these meetings because you are in charge. So Conakry was extraordinary. Conakry, because there was a crisis in Liberia, were given concurrent accreditation, not accreditation, but responsibility for Liberia. And this was a peak of all the trouble in Liberia, so we had to travel in and out of it. I'll leave those details out.
Yes, they have to get the book, find out the details.
And then soon after, Yaya Jammeh school occurred, and I was asked to go. In fact, 3 days after let me leave all those. That is the way that you learn your trade. I mean, I had never negotiated a technical agreement on my own. When Jammeh came, you see the details. I went through all kinds of. I had to negotiate as the leader of the negotiation process. And we are talking about a transition of young boys. When he came to power, he was 28 or 29. His number 2, Singate, was 25. So you can imagine, when they come to see you at midnight, the whole place, they're armed. And as they're sitting with you, you are alone, there are guns all over the place.
Weren't afraid?
But you're a young boy. You are silly, You're too courageous, just like it happened in Kinshasa. Yeah. But similar things occurred in Kinshasa.
But was there ever a time where you're like, I just need a break from all of this? I miss my life in Paris?
No. Because I'd become addicted to the real action. And I found Paris very boring. So when I was asked to go to Kinshasa, and the reasons you would find out in the book, I mean, there I really didn't want to go.
Why?
Because the level of insecurity in Kinshasa was incredible. There had just been a takeover of a government which had been in power forever. They had come from the east. The neighboring countries, DRC has 9 neighbors. The neighboring countries had a direct interest in what was happening because DRC is very rich. Probably one of the richest countries in the world. Some of the things they used to produce, telephones and aircrafts, DRC has more than any other country in the world. So all these neighbors had an economic interest in it, and many of them had sent soldiers to support the two sides of the case. So I talk about the role of Rwanda and Uganda, and then 20 minutes away by boat, there was a war in Congo-Brazzaville, and I had responsibility for Congo-Brazzaville. And then I had responsibility for Burundi and Rwanda. Both places were on fire. I mean, Kinshasa, I must admit, I was in a hurry to run away. No, because really,
it was dangerous.
It's very dangerous. Very dangerous. You find out all the details.
But in spite of all these warlords you came across, that you narrate an experience with Charles Taylor when he was on his way to the International Criminal Court and his daughters were crying. And it almost feels as though you empathized with him. And we all see him as a villain.
I had worked with Charles Taylor much earlier when President Uffe used to mediate in the Liberian crisis. And we used to go to Yamoussoukro. All this is part of the volume 2 of the... all this is not in the book, but it's just give you the background.
Okay.
And Charles Taylor and the then Prime Minister Kofi Kofi from Togo were the younger boys. And the heads of state didn't want to talk to them. So I was the one they could talk to. And we'll go and hide in the corner and have long conversations. So I'd worked with him for a long time. And on the day that we were taking him away to Abuja, it was not empathy, it was relief, because what we saw in Monrovia that day, they could have attacked and killed all the heads of states who were there. We were with Mbeki, Chisano, Obasanjo, and President Kufuor. There was an airy feeling. You don't want me to tell the details.
Don't tell the details.
This is told in the book.
Yes, it is. But how did it feel just seeing the way his family perceived him? Because the world didn't see it that way.
The family loved him. And as you know, his wife later became a very important person.
Yeah.
It still is a very important person in Liberia. It was a difficult trip.
Yeah.
And even the heads of states were silent. Obasanjo was trying to crack jokes. They just ignored him. And you know, it seemed almost unreal. And our worry was that we knew what the U.S. was planning. And the U.S. had Marines offshore. And why we were so sad, that is not in this book, because it's in the volume 2.
Okay.
I can tell.
When is the volume 2 coming out?
Oh.
Okay, don't give it away, because on Monday we're focusing on this book.
We had a meeting in the presidency to negotiate with Chancellor Mbeki, Chisano, President Kufuor, and Chancellor. We had agreed on Chancellor leaving. We had actually started drafting an announcement which was going to go and give at the conference center. I came from the president's office to take a drafting pad to write out an agreement for them to sign. When I heard that the court in Freetown had already charged Chancellor. So the whole day that we had been locked in there so I went in there and said, look, you're wasting your time. They have just charged Chancellor. And they were furious.
Wow.
Because the deal we had cut in that room was better than what they were offering. And it was Chancellor who was going to the conference center to announce that I decided to do AB. It was a better way than, you know, everybody else trying to breathe down his throat, you know. Anyway.
We'll read the rest in the book. But talk to us about your relationship with the different heads of states you worked under, all the way from Liman to Rawlings. We're going to get to Kufuor later, but how was that relationship like?
Let me start with Rawlings.
Okay.
We were in school together. He was 2 years ahead of me.
He's your brother's friend?
My late brother's friend. Yeah. And they were very close. So I used to be their errand boy sometimes. And no.
Hopefully you bought legal good.
So he knew me. But once he became head of state and he started traveling with me, he discovered a different person because he didn't know me at work and all that. And let me admit publicly that I was surprised about the amount of responsibility he used to give me. He used to call me sometimes to council and say, look, I want you to draft this thing for me. But he had his foreign ministers. So the relationship was good. It was very professional. And he could trust me because he insisted on me being his interpreter on the most delicate missions. So I had a good working relationship with Jerry Rawlings. And, you know, he paid me back. There was a time he was going to Washington on an official visit. I was on posting in Conakry, but he sent an aircraft to get me to Accra so that I'll accompany him and then respond to the issues on sub-regional security. So I had a good relationship with Jerry Rawlings, and I learned a lot from it. Liman was even better because President Liman discovered that Professor Ansa was my special subject lecturer, and they were very close. So after I'd been, then I was deputy chief of protocol, and Ambassador Keto used to allow me to go and sit in the handover sessions. Once he saw Professor Ansa coming in, Professor Ansa be party with him. That was it. The man insisted that I should accompany him on all his trips to Africa. So I had a good relationship with Liman, and at night he used to sit with us, sometimes with Professor Bene, late Professor Bene, sometimes with Professor Ivan Adai. And he used to sort of talk to us about his vision for Ghana and Africa. And for a young officer, it was fantastic. I'd barely been there for 2 years, 3 years, and I was learning the trade. So in his first meeting with Eyadema, which I described, I picked up a lot of things. So I had a good relationship with Liman too. But President Kufuor was his secretary, and I worked with him every day for 8 years. So So you can understand that perhaps the closest relationship I had was with him, because we did with other heads of states. I only worked with them when I was back home from posting. So once I was away, there was no connection. But once I got back and I got into Africa department, then I would start traveling with them. But President Kufuor, I was stuck there from January 2001 to January 2009. And I had to see him every morning. And I was the last person he saw every night before he left.
Wow.
Or at least he would call me and ask if there were any outstanding issues, or if there were any letters he had to sign, or if I had committed him to any meetings he was unaware of, so that whether he liked it or not, he saw me first thing, and then said, as I used to tease him, so, you haven't got permission, you are going home. And he was very nice about it. And once, even if it's midnight, you call and say, which also meant that I could never leave the office before he left the office. And it's not him I was worried about, it was the ladies who worked for me. You know, Patience, Araba, Mami, Brago, Asantua, Patricia. And some of them will come to work pregnant. And you walk into their office, they'll be lying down with their big stomachs because they can't go, because I haven't closed 11:30 midnight. Working for presidents, it's not funny.
But you made it work.
I'm going to write a book about it.
So we should look out for that.
The temporary title is How Not to Govern Ghana.
How Not to Govern Ghana.
Inside Jack's presidency.
Wow, okay. It has to come out soon so that we can get it.
That will take a bit of time.
Okay. After the volume 2, then we'll get that one. Yes. So walk us through, especially the young diplomats who are watching us, how to navigate the way the different heads of states relate to one another. So Obasanjo's relationship with Rawlings versus his relationship with Kufuor. How do you handle that?
You see, you take a cue from your boss and you try and get as much information as possible as to the nature of their relationship, or you get an understanding. Once you get an understanding, then you know how to react. Because if you don't have the background, and that's one of the lessons I referred to in the book, in any conflict resolution situation, you do what we call a conflict analysis. And if you get the personality profile wrong, you're done. And in our third negotiation on the Côte d'Ivoire crisis, there's a gentleman called Dakure Tablé. Dakure, I didn't know that he had such a complex relationship with President Gbagbo. And each time we'd read the conclusion, he would take it up and talk, and he would collapse it. If we had done our homework well, we would have made sure that Dakure was not the spokesperson, because he gave us a hard time for one whole week. So that's part of those are some of the issues I raised for young diplomats who are starting their careers, that, you know, when you're doing conflict analysis, the various aspects of which you should cover for who your principal is, your president, so that he walks into the meeting completely briefed.
So looking back on your 44 years of service, what would you say were some of your highlights?
The most dangerous moments.
Why? Because
you felt that you were contributing to something concrete. I mean, when eventually the violence stopped in Banjul and Jammeh was allowed to continue, I breathed very big relief, because in the beginning it was very complicated, and you had to be at the center of it. You had to go into Banjul and make sure that our boss in Accra are aware, and they send you back. Look, there's a story of somebody who was finance minister who had come to Legon, and so had become our friend. He was working with the investment bank, but later, because he was close to us, they raised him, became secretary to cabinet, and he became finance minister. We got a hint that his life was in danger, and I was supposed to leave Conakry on Wednesday. I wrongly decided that I'll leave only on the Saturday, because the Ghana Airways came through Conakry on Wednesdays and Saturdays. that day, President Jammeh was traveling out of the country. So I met him at the airport and we talked. The finance minister I'm talking about was at the airport. Not knowing that whoever was interested in his death had planned to assassinate him on the Saturday. So I didn't have the time to have the discussion with the president and the vice president. Before I left, got to my hotel, he had been assassinated. All it should have taken was for me to leave on the Wednesday. And I didn't. And, you know, I look back and maybe we are all to blame for it. Maybe we are all to blame for it. In the volume 2, for instance, I talk about how we could have played a better role in saving the life of Sankara. But I drop a hint in
there.
Yeah, but because we're very engaged.
How was the experience like with Sankara?
Sankara?
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I was the only interpreter between him and President Rawlings all the time. So,
what was he like?
Lovely person. Young, dynamic, genuinely Pan-African. I mean, fresh, incorruptible, articulate. He's one of the few African leaders I've met who you could believe would not be corrupted. And he died like that. He died penniless. Yeah. He was an inspiration. And he was natural. And one day when Waga, finished the meeting, when we were going to sleep, then he came to the hotel at midnight, started banging on our doors. We said, what's happening? He said, I'm taking you to a nightclub. I'm not joking. So he went and woke President Rawlings up. And he went and took a guitar. Wow. Took us to a nightclub to go and jam. Our meeting was starting the following day at 7 a.m. But it was good working with Thomas Sankara. I give it a hint about in the volume 1, this one. But the real Sankara era comes in the volume 2.
From all your experiences with these African heads of state,
yes.
What will be your reflections on the current state of the continent?
Let me not give you my reflection on the current state, but let me give you a general view of my view of what's happening.
You're giving me a diplomatic answer.
No, but you will get my answer from it. Okay. We went to Sharm el-Sheikh for an extraordinary AU summit. And that summit was supposed to take a decision on the exclusion or otherwise of Mugabe. So we kept Mugabe in the waiting room. And the heads of states were talking. But as I raised my head up, I was wondering what the meeting was about, because I saw Mubarak from Egypt, I saw Ben Ali, I saw Compaore, I saw Sassou Nguesso, I saw Bongo. You got a drift. And these were people who were claiming that Mugabe was illegitimate and they were going to question him about issues of governance. It is a shame. I think Africa deserves better quality leadership. And I hope that is the right path. Because some of them are outstanding. The former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Meles Zenawi, used to sit next to us in most AU summit. The guy is bright and fresh, and he was not reading notes. President Mbeki was a very firm president. In fact, in his time, he was one of the few who could stand up to Gaddafi in the AU summits. Wow. And he would stand up to him publicly. The rest were all afraid. Brother man, brother Gaddafi.
When it's all said and done, what would you say were some of your proudest moments?
Proudest? The moments I enjoyed most. But proudest, I had a private lunch with the Queen in Buckingham Palace. And they sat me next to her because we were staying in Buckingham Palace during the state visit. And I enjoyed that 1 hour talking about cricket. And she knew so much about Ghana that as we got up from the lunch, she and I really enjoyed that conversation. And I've never forgotten it. Then once we went to the Oval Office, unofficially, because President Bush wanted to consult President Kufuor. In the middle of it, President Bush decided to ask President Kufuor to ask me my views on the Cote d'Ivoire crisis. And I enjoyed the silence in the room as I carried on. And I thought I was talking to myself. No. And they kept asking me questions. But I had acquired that experience for many years of seeing symmetry as a young diplomat. I'd seen heads of states talk to each other, language they would use, and the methods they would use, and the signs, and the body language, and all. So it was the benefit. I could see that some of it had washed over me. And then I also, the day we finished the 100-day peace negotiations on Liberia with General Abubakar, who was chairing the meeting, because it had been a very, very long negotiation. It was so difficult that at that time, this house was not occupied. So I used to bring them here at night for General Abubakar to deal with them on a one-to-one basis. So that was, so there are many highlights. Generally, I've enjoyed my career. And when I was walking away after 34 years, I had no regrets.
How did it feel? That was 10 years ago.
Yeah, because I was going to teach at University of Ghana, Lesia, and I knew that I was going to have the opportunity to use some of the examples that I've given you today to give the young diplomats an opportunity to understand what the job is really about. And I do hope that many of them benefited from my... In fact, they were the ones who inspired me. The students. I had a student from Cameroon, and I went to open a conference for mid-career diplomats, and I gave a speech on the evolution of the African international relations since independence. This girl chased me, found out where I lived, and wanted a copy of the paper. So she then went back to join the service. And we've been in touch. When she has a big issue, she sends me a long email, and I'm happy to be able to mentor. My students are all over the place.
I'm sure they're happy that you finally have.
There are even some here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, but they encourage me. In fact, one of them did a review because he's now got a PhD and he's working as a political advisor to the British High Commissioner.
Let's talk about the book. When is the launch?
The launch is on Monday, the 14th of September at 3 p.m.
Okay.
And I will give you the link to the launch.
Okay.
And I'll also give you the links to the email addresses and telephone numbers to the distributors. Because as soon as it's done on Tuesday, they will be in all the major. But I'll give you the details. So if you do me the honor of just pasting them at the end of the interview, I'll be most grateful to see.
We will do that. What would you say makes a great diplomat?
I wish I could quote it verbatim. There's a chapter in a book called Diplomatic Practice. The author is Satow, and Satow's latest version has been reviewed by about 15 Oxford lecturers. And in this chapter, he's talking about the qualities of a good diplomat. He says he must be well-read, he must have a good personality, he must be tactful, he must be pleasant. But at the end of it, he says, oh, I almost forgot intelligence. Then he adds, well, I had assumed it. So there you are. You've got your answer.
He must be intelligent.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Who said that?
I thought you said I.
No, we're quoting the person you just referred to, right?
But you're assuming that I was a good diplomat.
No, I know you were a great diplomat.
Thank you, but I'm not sure that everybody would agree with
I think everybody would agree. Now, if you could speak to the troublesome young man who gave that teacher a living hell,
yes,
what would you tell him about this adventure of a life that he was about to embark on?
There's only one way that a young officer pursuing this career can succeed. You see, because you're dealing with every subject under the sun. So your greatest tool is knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. Where does the knowledge come from? Reading, reading, reading. But more importantly, because there's so much information on the net and elsewhere, you must have the ability to have what I call superior information. In other words, if everybody is reading about what's happening in Mali today, I can tell you that I know a lot of things happening in Mali since yesterday morning that other people don't know. Because it is important that you have the mechanism to have access to information which is not just on the net. That makes you a very efficient contributor to the formulation of diplomacy and foreign policy.
Ambassador D.K Osei, thank you so much.
Dziffa, thanks for having me. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
It's been good talking to you.
It's been great having you here.
Thank you very much.
And there you have it. The launch is this Monday, 14th September 2020. 3 p.m. We'll be giving you the information really soon so that you can all join and get a copy of this book. Hi there. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends.
This is Breakfast Daily on Citi TV.
Join the Breakfast Daily team Monday through Fridays from 7:30 a.m. to 10. Join us for breakfast daily, only on Citi TV.